If you haven't heard, I can take on anything, even the unseen.
Some people fear the dark, but others welcome its return.
When the lights go out, all bets are off.
In the dark, you only have yourself.
And today, we'll always talk about the good news and bad news about money. And there's always good news and bad news about money, no matter which way it is. And we have a guest today. His name is Gary Wagner. He covers precious metals. His company is the goldforecast.com, a daily newsletter. And Gary is much respected for his opinions on what's going on in gold. So I'm very personally interested in interviewing him because I love gold. And lately the market's been pretty volatile in gold. This is February 2023, and the market's going up and down after coming up for a while. And so I want to find out what he's doing, but please check into thegoldforecast.com. And he's a frequent contributor to Stocks and Commodities magazine. So he's very well respected in the industry. And I think it's kind of interesting that he's in Hawaii and I'm from Hawaii, and he has Japanese swords behind him. And my family, this is my great uncle. This photograph, Gary, was taken by Commodore Perry when Perry opened the doors of Japan, and that sword in his hand is mine. It's upstairs in my gun room. It's in very safekeeping. It's spectacular. It's got blood stains on it. So our family was samurai in the lineage, if you understand that. It's like the feudal knights and stuff like that.
I very much understand.
So it's a very culture of England. But I understand you're from Hungary. Is that correct, Gary?
I am a first-generation immigrant. Both of my parents were born in Hungary. My mother in Pest, which is part of Budapest. My father in a small village called Gyöngyös. Our lineage goes back at least 10 generations of all being pure Hungarian, correct.
And then how did you get to Hawaii, Gary?
Well, it's an interesting story, but to make it short, I started coming here about 40 years ago. I have family here. The first time I came here, I felt something special, what people called the aloha spirit, the respect for the Aina. And I knew at that moment that it wasn't if, but when I would make the transition and make this my permanent home. I moved here full time in 2000. So I've been here full time for about 23 years. But to give you a little bit of tenure, I have two sons. My youngest is 31, and he was in diapers in Kailua when Hurricane Iniki hit the islands.
Wow.
So I have been here for years. It took me a while to move here permanently.
I remember Hurricane Iniki very, very well because I was living at the Colony Surf on Waikiki Beach, and it was pounding us. It was really frightening. So anyway,
it was.
So how is it you have almost a California accent, so you don't sound like you're from a Eastern European country.
Well, I'm not. I was born in Detroit. Typically, people say I've got a broadcaster's voice, which is a neutral Central American voice. I lived in California from 83 to 99, so it never really changed. And to this day, I sound like I believe a Midwesterner, but that's up to the audience to determine what my tonality and accent is.
So would you explain what a candlestick does?
Absolutely. First of all, I have to say it's an honor because what you have done by presenting the idea of passive income changed millions of American individuals' lives by giving them that information. It's truly an honor to say whatever I say and hopefully has some meaning. Before I talk about candlesticks, I want to define the difference between the Western trader and the Eastern counterpart.
That'd be good.
Okay. So if I say to you that gold closed up $50 today, you have intrinsically inferred that I'm representing to the current price to where it closed yesterday, correct?
Yeah.
Okay. So the Western technician puts its primary focus on a close-to-close change to chart price movement over time in a stock or commodity, and I focus on commodities and hard assets. The Japanese doesn't look at it that way, and it's a very subtle difference, but it's huge. The Japanese look at each trading session as a battle, and that battle is between the bullish faction and the bearish faction. And so the most important piece of information to the Japanese trader is where a market opens on a trading session and where it closes. If it opens and closes higher, it's filled in into a certain color. In the case of the way I do it, it's green. And if it opens and closes lower, we paint it in red. Originally, it was black and white because it was on parchment paper. The key is that you're familiar with a bar chart, and I'm assuming that most of your viewers that have even a basic knowledge of technical analysis know what a bar chart is. It plots 4 data points: open, low, high, and close. A candlestick chart uses the identical data points, but it has one key distinction. The high and the low are drawn the same way. It's a straight vertical line. In a bar chart, they have a horizontal slash representing the open and a horizontal slash on the other side representing the close.
Right.
All the Japanese do is they draw a rectangle around the open and closing price, because their belief is that that candlestick gives you a lot of information on who was victorious during the battle of the trading session that you're looking at that day. And so it also goes into the linguistics of Japanese speech, which is word picture or kanjis. It's much more expressive. It uses the same information. You give up nothing, but it increases your awareness visually. And so when you look at a candlestick chart and the different color changes, the size of the candles, it kind of pops out in 3 dimensions and immediately gives you information.
So as I said, Gary, Alexander Everett talks about, technical trading, which most people do. When you watch CNBC, that's what's on the charts. And I found out I have a brain for real estate. And so when he talked about candlesticks, because I'm Japanese, I understood it even less. Wasn't the Hungarian Revolution 1956?
Yes.
I remember that very clearly. And that's why I hold up this book here. I'm being attacked by Arizona State University because I'm a capitalist. And I was in a press release, and I think you'll understand this, being from Hungary and appreciating what America offers people who come here, that I held this book up to the camera while being interviewed about how do you feel about Arizona State teachers, upset with me because I'm a capitalist. And I said, I'm a conservative capitalist. I don't know about all these. And I held this book up and I said, you should read this book. I read this book when I was 18 years old in 1965, because I went to school in New York, went to military school, one of the 5 federal academies, because my family, again, because we were interned and prisoners and slaves, basically, because Japanese came to America as indentured servants. That's another way of saying paid slaves. I'm sitting here with my flight jacket because like my uncles, I fought for America. I fought in Vietnam twice. Which
I am a little bit young. I was born in 54. Right. I was 1H in terms of my draft number. I understand that you actually went to Vietnam. My friends that went to Vietnam never came back the same. You have to be a changed person. And my family were changed because they lived through the atrocities of war. And the fact that you went there, did your duty, and came back, the one thing that always hurt me inside is they didn't salute you. They didn't say thank you for your service because it was unpopular. And while I personally don't believe we should have been there, the military men that went over there because they wanted to do what their superiors told them, and they believed in protecting the country, and they took that doctrine wholly. But the fact that there was negative sentiment for the soldiers returning, including my friends, always ate me up inside, because anyone who I have been blessed, I never had to deal with the atrocities of war. My friends did. I saw how changed they were. And the fact that people would spit on them or not respect them ate me up inside. I understand that. And
Oh,
thank you. Thank you for your service, by the way.
No, I didn't do it for that. I'm just saying that's part of the Japanese heritage. So I'm quite honored. Like I said, this is my great uncle. That sword is in my keeping, and you have a sword proudly displayed upon you. So I'm honored to be in your presence, Gary. So
thank you so much.
Enough of this kiss ass shit about the
okay.
stuff. So when we come back, I want to discuss how candlesticks change your life and why it's worth studying.
Perfect.
Does that make sense to you? Because there's a gap, Gary. The gap between rich and poor right now is so wide, it's dangerous. We're on the brink of communism again, and that's why.
At least, yes, sir.
I wrote this book here. You know, fake money. That's our compatico there. Fake teachers. I mean, they're picketing. They're going to picket my event at ASU Wednesday night, and then fake assets. The U.S. dollar is not a frickin' asset. Gold is. And so I want to also let you know I'm pretty hardcore gold miner, Gary.
So if I, for example, say, would you rather have this or this, we're in agreement.
Is that silver?
We'll talk about that after the break.
Okay, so Gary, this is a dory bar from my gold mine.
Okay.
I own.
Okay.
I don't. What I'm trying to say is I couldn't do. I don't have. You have a Japanese mind. You know, I have an American mind, and so I have to buy the frickin' gold mine and not worry about the price of silver. It's a silver, and this here is one of my proudest things. It's my gold from my mine. It's the richest gold mine in America. The call sign, I took it public in July of this year, last year, 2022. Gary, the sign is called ODV. Please check it out on your candlesticks and all this stuff.
I'll be a stockholder. Just out of respect.
Can you see the gold in that thing?
Absolutely, absolutely, and it's in veins. I have to look sideways. My monitors are sideways to have this set because it's a real set. But yes.
Wait. So let me finish, Gary. You have a Japanese mind. I have a slow American mind. That's why I buy gold mines, but I don't trade candlesticks. And we come back. I want you to explain to the world how candlesticks change your life. Because my God, this gap between rich and poor right now because of fake money. And so that's why you're a guest on the Rich Dad Radio Show, because I want to find out what you learned from the Japanese that changed your life. We'll be right back. Second Rich Dad Radio Show. The good news and bad news about money today. We have some really good news because we have an expert in what's called Japanese candlesticks. And for those who may not know what Japanese candlesticks, neither do I, because I studied them. I still don't know, and I'm Japanese. So his name is Gary Wagner. He's very well respected in the industry of gold, which, as you may know, I am a frickin' gold bug. I own gold mines and silver mines. This is a dory bar from my silver mine, which I sold to a major, which is what entrepreneurs do. But anyway, Gary is first generation, so his parents had to escape from a country with hyperinflation. And hyperinflation very simply means cash is trash. Nobody wants it. And that's why I wrote this book here, Fake Money, Fake Teachers, Fake Assets. And the reason you have to know financial, not financial planning, but cash flow from assets, passive income, is because our cash is trash and our assets are fake. So with that said, Gary, how did you become so Japanese when you came from Hungary? Your parents are from Hungary. And what did they say about hyperinflation when they left Hungary?
They experienced hyperinflation. I was told stories about boxes of currency needed to buy a loaf of bread. They highly believed that gold and art were the only assets to own. That's how I was brought up. The way I was exposed to candlesticks, I started as a...
Wait, you told me your uncle was buying gold at bulk prices or something, or
My father used to go to New York to buy gold when it was illegal to buy
Yes.
coins as scrap gold. Yes. And he
Why
took
was
me
it
on those.
illegal to own gold for Americans?
It was part of Roosevelt's thing in the 1930s when they confiscated the gold. They let you buy jewelry, but you couldn't buy a gold minted coin anymore. They had confiscated them and melted them down.
Yes, but also what happens historically is that was 1933. 1936, Social Security was started. And now Americans are broke because Social Security is going to go broke. And so that's why I want you on the program, because you and I are the similar, we may be different nationalities, but we're both hardcore gold bugs.
Absolutely.
And so we could, we're kind of short on time, but how, and this gap is too big between rich and poor right now. How did candlesticks and how did you study it and how did it change your life? That's a pretty profound statement, my friend.
They did. Now, I'll try to express it very quickly. Started as a commodity broker. I quickly learned that 90% of the people that started in commodities lost. I would not be part and parcel to an industry where clients who became my friends didn't profit from their association with me. I became a CTA, commodity trading advisor. I
Wow,
was,
really?
yes,
That's
so I was
impressive.
paid 15% of the profits. And I felt I could go deeper than that because I wanted to educate people. I had a client that was remarkable in his accuracy. I saw him hit 15 correct trades in a row, and every time he was right. And he was an engineer in Connecticut named David Moore. And I asked him, David, what the heck are you doing that allows you to sell the tops and buy the bottoms when everyone else thinks the opposite? They had that mentality, that group mentality. He said, I can't explain it to you, but I'll send you a book. He sent me The Japanese Chart of Charts by Seiko Shimizu. Took me 3 readings to get it. Once I got it, it was kind of the doors opening up, understanding something I never saw. And from there, I realized I couldn't teach it. I developed a software product and I wrote my first book it was published in 1993 called Trading Applications of Japanese Candlestick Charting. And then about a year later, I was named one of the top traders. I'm listed as one of the 12 top traders
No
in the
kidding.
world by Joe Kutzinger. I believe he wrote that. And this is directly due to my understanding of candlesticks. What it did is it changed my life. It made me a better trader. It taught me how to effectively interpret the market in a way I could never have done before. It made me successful. It was the doorway. I've worked with Kitco Metals for 12 years, writing daily blogs. That came about because of the information I had captured. I realized that it was unique, it was different, and it provided information unavailable to the Western trader. And don't get me wrong, Ellers and I both wrote for Stocks and Commodities. That's how I know him. I actually started in California in KY with John Bollinger. He was the technical manager. So I was trained in Western technical indicators, moving averages, stochastics and whatnot.
Right.
But when I was introduced to candlesticks, I saw and realized a way to look at the market that quite honestly was a way to be much more profitable, a higher percentage of the time. And I wanted to share that with my clients and I wanted to educate people about it to benefit them.
And you've done a fantastic job, Gary, because you're so well respected.
Thank you.
In a world where people may know there's 2 basic types of investing: fundamental, which is what Rich Dad does, income statements and balance sheets, and technical, which is emotions. Markets go up and markets come down. And the great thing, the reason I was studying technical was fundamentals go up too slowly. But when they come down like a house. They just drop. So I was studying technicals for self-protection. And that's when I first heard of candlesticks, Japanese candlesticks. But my brain is a real estate brain, so I just couldn't catch on to it. So would you explain what a candlestick is different than American or Western technical trading?
Absolutely. I already talked about the different of the viewpoint. I consider myself a hybrid technician. I use fundamentals to determine the direction of markets. I think gold's going to hit an all-time high this year because of the fundamentals. But the technicals allow me a precise, accurate entry and exit points for trades. And for our subscribers that are physical accumulators, I tell them when to accumulate, when to hold off. If they want to sell some, I warn them, don't put it into cash unless you can buy a property, buy an asset with it. I give them the optimum time to actually sell that, because I'm like you. I buy gold, I buy silver. It's going to my kids. It will never be sold. I never bought it to sell it. I bought it to pass on generational wealth, because I know those dollars are going to become more worthless each day. And that is a fact. It's an undeniable fact. So that's how I got into candlesticks and why I believe in them, because they help me teach my associates and the people that I speak with, because I used to lecture a lot more, the benefits, and I try to teach them how to implement and use them.
Yeah, so what you explained to me, probably clearer than anybody else I know, is candlestick looks like this. You have a line and a line. And the line shows you the buy and then the sell, or the sell and the buy and all this stuff. And so it's actually kind of a picture in your head when you look at a candlestick.
It is a picture, and it goes one step further, that maybe if I'm fortunate enough to get invited back, those individual candlesticks are one thing, but they form in groups patterns. Okay. And so example, one's called the Three River Evening Star. It has a definition, and it will give you a very accurate possibility that a market that's moving up is about to pivot and sell off. It's going to hit a top, and it will provide you that information far quicker than any Western tool. The key is most Western technical indicators are lagging. A moving average by nature is a lagging indicator.
Right.
One of my mentors, Larry Williams, taught me that technicians are kind of like a person standing at the edge of the back of a boat, looking at the wake from the propellers and trying to ascertain where the market's going to move by seeing where it's been. It lags. There's only a few things that are not lagging indicators, but leading indicators. Candlesticks is one of them. Fibonacci, usage of Fibonacci numbers, ratios, retracements, and extension is another one. There are very few indicators that run ahead of real-time data.
I tried Fibonacci also, but I flunked math. It just didn't click in my head. So I'm a real estate guy. Well, would you show your book again, please? Because I think it's important.
Certainly. My primary book that I wrote was Trading Applications of Japanese Candlestick Charting. It's available on Amazon. I published it in '93. It explains first it explains a complete overview of the history. It defines each candlestick and each pattern. And then I have real life examples of trading gold using them, trading cattle, because my expertise was commodities when I started. I always thought stocks were too slow, and real estate was something I did for myself. And it wasn't, I would buy real estate because A, I needed a place to live, and B, I could then buy another place and get passive income, which I learned from you.
Yeah. So Gary, is that book under your name?
It is co-authored by, it's Gary S. Wagner and Brad Matheny. Brad was my partner who helped me develop the Candlestick Forecaster.
I love it.
Which was recognized as the first computer program to automatically identify candlestick patterns.
Right. I love it. You know why? It's because I get my ass in trouble. The reason I'm in trouble with Arizona State and the school teachers are after me is because I call them a bunch of fakes. They talk about things they don't do. They teach subjects they have no relationship to or much use to anybody. And so one of the things, we're putting on, Sarah and I are putting on an event April 6th, 7th, 8th. And it's my real team, my real entrepreneurs coming together to teach. But I'm sick and tired of teachers who are fake teachers, fake money, and fake assets. So I congratulate you. That I suggest everybody pick up the book just to understand it. Now, I am Japanese, but I didn't understand it, Gary. But we have different types of minds. Let me ask a quick question on gold and silver, because again, I own tons. I literally have more gold and more. I started buying my first precious metal was I would take my I caddy at Hilo Country Club in Hilo. I
Okay.
get a buck. I get a buck for 9 holes, and I take that buck down. I go to First Hawaiian Bank, but back then was Bishop Bank, and I would get a roll of quarters.
When it
Not
was,
4 quarters or 10 dimes, whatever it was, and I would look for that little copper ring around it. If it had a copper ring, went back to the bank. I didn't know what I was doing. I was 17 years old, 64. But that's Gresham's law, which states that when fake money enters the system, real money goes into hiding. And so I knew the real money was still at the bank, so I trade my little dollars in, give back all the copper tinged fake silver because Johnson took it off the gold standard, the silver standard in 64. And I have tons of silver and gold mines, and I'm never going to sell it because I use debt, because money became debt, as you know, in 71 with Nixon.
right.
And because I use debt, I pay no taxes. That's my formula. But I'm so glad you wrote that book, because you're more Japanese than me, and I didn't understand it.
We're both old school with the right values. I see a
Yeah.
commonality there, and we both appreciate gold. And that's why I pulled this up, which is I've been buying silver kilos lately
Right.
because I'm interested in the silo, the weight. I don't believe in numismatics, only because they can be valued at huge different ranges.
Wait. For those who don't know what Gary just used, a few people use, it's called numismatic. So when you go into a gold or silver dealer, you'll find one quarter worth $5, another quarter worth $50. And the difference is the date on the coin. That's numismatic. It's a collectible. So this is my question: why silver? Because I've been saying, I speak for Lair Capital. I'm always saying buy silver. Why silver?
To me, it's because it has more upside potential. I stopped buying gold at around 1400. I like the buffalo with the Indian on one side, 24K, and the buffalo on the other from the US Mint. Small premium, but they're beautiful coins. In the same way that when I buy silver, I kind of like to buy the US Mint ones. It costs me a little bit more, but I enjoy looking at them. But silver hit a high twice. Silver went to $50 twice. Never hit that when gold hit these all-time highs, and I think that will change.
What was the silver coin you held up, Gary? What was the silver coin you held up?
It was a one U.S. Liberty 1 ounce piece. It's just in a nice case.
So it's not an eagle.
No, it's a Liberty. It's got. I'll hold it up so that.
When was it minted? What was the strike date?
This was 2016, and I believe they are called Liberties.
Okay.
The Liberty silver dollar.
Okay. And so last question I have for you on this. See, I like silver because it's an industrial metal as well as a monetary metal and a numismatic metal. So what do you see any demand increasing because of EV, electronic vehicles, batteries, and silver being, I understand silver is being shipped to India and China in large volumes. So, our metals are moving from west to east, into the Asian countries. Do you see the same trends going?
Absolutely. No matter where they're producing them, they need silver. So there's two components to silver. It's a semi-precious metal and an industrial metal. It hasn't kept up with inflation in the same way gold has. However, the usage for silver will far outstrip the usage for gold. And for that reason, there will be demand for silver that is in the industrial area. That's a growing area that will only get larger and larger. That's why I stopped buying gold when it was 1400. Now I only buy silver.
Now you're telling me. I was buying gold at 18. But anyway,
you were smarter than me.
But that's what candlesticks will tell you, when to come in and when to get out. So anyway, Gary, thank you very much for your wisdom and all this. Once again, you are the producer of the Gold Forecast, but you buy silver. And it's a daily video newsletter. And then what else can we say about you that people get in touch with your work on a daily
Well,
basis?
we have a YouTube channel that's the Gold Forecast. You can see all of the videos I've done since 2009 at no charge. You can sign up for our free newsletter and watch our weekend review at no charge. Our premium subscribers are the ones that actually want to use that information in a more tangible way for either trading or accumulation. But we offer free services for those that are just getting interested and a premium subscriber service for those that need it.
Okay, so how did they get that
Thegoldforecast.com, sign up for the 14-day free trial. If you see there's value, stay with it. If you don't take it. And if you do join up, we make it difficult to get out of it. Send me an email, say I don't want it anymore, and you're done. We don't make you jump through hoops.
Do you have a prediction on everyone wants a prediction. What's the price of gold in
Happy to do that.
5 years?
My technical studies indicate the gold will end up between 23 and 2,400 by the end of Q4 this year. That's my projection.
That's a lot. That's about
It's
20%.
conservative compared to some.
What about silver? Today's about
Silver, I want to see it break through 30 because silver is an unusual animal in that it didn't go to all-time highs when gold did. I think I'm looking at year of end between 42 and 47. I'm thinking it might approach it, but I'd love to see it break above it. If gold goes to an all-time high, so should silver, but that hasn't been the case historically over the last 4 or 5 years.
Yeah. And so I want to say the bad news is if you see gold and silver going up, that means the dollar's going down.
There's no other way the dollar can go. And with Yellen and the debt ceiling, we don't have time for that. The dollar will always be worth less. Yeah. Other currencies are in a race to zero because they can print them. Yeah. And so fiat, or as you call fake currencies, will never be worth more than they're worth today. That's my sentiment. I could be wrong.
I'm not prejudiced. I call it fake money and fake teachers, but I should have called them fiat teachers. Gary, I'm catching hell right now from Arizona State teachers, but I'm a conservative and I like capitalism. And I think every one of them should read this book here. I had to read it in 1965 and that changed my life. That book changed. Communism changed my life. Gary, thank you very much. And we'll make sure that people get to your site. And I appreciate your service to humanity and glad Japanese candlesticks changed your life. Welcome back, Robert Kiyosaki, the Rich Dad Show, the good news and bad news about money. Special thanks to Gary Wagner. He's executive he is the producer of the goldforecast.com. Please visit his site and look into Japanese candlesticks. And he's more Japanese than me. I'll show this picture again. This is a picture of my great uncle. And that samurai sword is in my gun cabinet here in Arizona. And Gary has his swords. And these swords are worth thousands and thousands and thousands of dollars. The thing that's kind of interesting in this is a swords guy looked at it. He says, you got bloodstains on it, because the sword is kind of damaged. He says, they cut through bone. And I'm going, so this is around 1850, I think this picture was taken. So it's kind of interesting for a white guy who's more Japanese than a Japanese guy. What do you think, Sarah?
I thought it was a great discussion. When we first pitched Gary coming on the show and he's talking about Japanese candlesticks, I had zero clue what the heck he was talking about. And so I had to go Google it. And then I was like, oh, okay. So I just thought it's something we've never discussed in my time with the Rich Dad Radio Show. Right. I thought it was a valuable piece of information. I loved how he described the difference between a Western trader and the Eastern trader and what they see as important. I thought that was very interesting. And then
what did you pick up? Because like I said, I studied this stuff and I have a white man's brain. I didn't catch on to it.
So this is one of those, I'm going to have to go back and listen to it. But basically, he was talking about how they build a picture to see a trend. And their pictures are different because they value the open and close differently than how we would. So it's it's a vertical visual versus a horizontal. So different though, right? Never even would have considered talking about, thought about the importance of a candlestick.
Let me add one thing.
Yeah, go ahead.
The candlestick is called a candlestick because of these points on it. And it's a picture, so it wraps their brains into it. And apparently his brain adapted to it.
Yeah.
So in my vocabulary as a Japanese Westerner, we're either in accumulation or distribution. Those are the two words. It's entry and exit. Accumulate, distribute means you sell. And I never sell gold or silver. I almost never sell real estate either, because I'm in accumulation. And as this book says, I want assets, not fake assets. And it's got to be making money. So gold and silver always makes money because it's real money. It doesn't lose. I call gold and silver God's money because it was here when the earth was formed. And that's what this here again. This is my little gold mine, all signed ODV on New York Stock Exchange. Check it out. So what else you pick up, Sarah?
Last thing before we got to go, I just thought it was so interesting you coming from a Japanese American background. His family is first American Hungarian, they immigrated from Hungary, and he was describing how, because inflation was so high. And I mean, all the stories we hear about these countries, people who came to America because inflation or their money was worthless. I thought, how timely was this conversation that we're having, given where we're headed right now with the dollar? And then that connection with Japanese history, I thought that was so cool. So it was, this show, Japanese candlesticks, samurai swords, gold. I mean, it's so ridiculous how this could all be together in such a beautiful picture and conversation. So I'm excited for our audience to hear this one.
Yeah, and I wore my Marine flight jacket, because I said my family fought because we were locked up and interned in a concentration camps in California. My family, my uncles, 5 uncles on one side fought against the Germans and the Italians, and 2 uncles fought against the Japanese. Study Japanese candlesticks. I mean, I did my best, which is why I'm an accumulation and never distribution. I always hold, and Kim and I will pass on our gold, silver, and real estate into a trust, and that trust will pay out money to charities for the rest of so long as that trust is there. So we accumulate, we don't distribute. So that's why gold and silver will be here, because gold and silver are God's money, was placed here by God. It's in the earth. And that's why I have silver. This is 400 ounces. I don't know how many ounces it is. But this is a dory bar. This is raw silver coming out of a mine. I own the mine. And Gary owns the charts going up and down. So, final words, Sarah.
Final words, just thankful to Gary. And you met him at VRIC with Jay Martin. So that was a great connection for you to make up there while you were up there with your other gold bug friends. So just appreciative of the conversation and learning something new vocabulary.
Yeah, that's a good point. If you really want to learn to be an entrepreneur in precious metals, there's a program that goes on. It's called VRIC, Vancouver Resource Investment Conference. It's put on by Jay Martin. He's got his own podcast. But that's where I learned to be an entrepreneur, in Vancouver, British Columbia. I was standing at that booth 25 years ago at VRIC, Vancouver Resources Investor Conference, trying to sell my gold mine. I had a gold mine in China. We did strike gold. We had 1 billion ounces, I think, or 1 million ounces of gold in China. And for about 3 months, I was a billionaire until the Chinese found out we struck gold. And the Chinese took my mine away from me.
Was set up, you can see back, there's this thing here. And hanging from a stand is a globe. And what the globe represents is from my friend George Gammon. He says the economy is a little gondola hanging on this big hot air balloon. And as we all know, that hot air balloon is getting bigger every day. So this is my new home office. Got a little my flip chart here, my little globe. But anyway, I'm very happy to interview a great friend of ours. His name is Jay Martin. He puts on the fantastic VRIC, Vancouver Resource Investment Conference, VRIC, and I will be there speaking at it. on January 29th and 30th in Vancouver, British Columbia. So we're talking today about why, if you don't have gold, and I mean physical gold or physical silver, you better start doing it now, because the US dollar, although Jay is Canadian, he can see sometimes clearer than Americans can how screwed up our dollar is. So Jay, welcome to the first initial program for my new office at the Rich Dad Radio Show.
I'm happy to be here, Robert. It's good to see you.
Good seeing you. So yesterday I panicked. Gold pushed 2,000 US. I don't know what it is in Canadian, in the loonie, but I think next stop is 5,000 for gold. Okay. And it may take another 5 years, but I think this here is a real gold coin. And the first one I ever bought was in 1972. I bought it in Hong Kong, and I paid $50 for this. And today it's $2,000 plus. And this also is a silver coin. This is real silver. I don't like fake money. And that's why this Vancouver Resource Investment Conference is important, because you come to hear about why, if you don't have gold, physical gold and silver, you should have some now. So welcome to the program, Jay.
I'm happy to be here, Robert. Looking forward to this.
How long have you been doing the VRIC?
The show itself is over 20 years at this point, 27 years, and I've been running it for the last 12 years. And so, as you know, the bulk of those 12 years have been a pretty bearish market for precious metals, and a couple of false starts along the way. And what I'm seeing today is what you're seeing. I think a lot of individuals are realizing they might be getting caught a bit flat-footed by having zero exposure to, historic money. But I feel a bit of a mission, like I feel driven at this conference, Robert, honestly, to communicate the importance of that, especially to people in the West, because as you know, culturally in the West, we're sold this story that gold is a pet rock, that it delivers no yield, it has no value, etc. And we hear this from people like the Oracle of Omaha, for example, right? Gold's a pet rock. Whereas a lot of countries in the East, civilians are encouraged to buy gold jewelry, to store wealth in gold. And we're sold an opposite story in the West. And I think it's going to catch a lot of people flat-footed.
But also, the thing is, you are in the industry, and most Americans are not even close to the industry. Most Americans are into paper, like bonds and the dollar, US dollar.
Right.
But right now, what Jay knows is there's massive movements of gold and silver moving to China and India. What's going on with these massive movements of gold, and what do you think the Chinese and Indians are up to, and Russians?
Yeah. I think that the fragile trust that we've had globally for the last 40 years has been shattered, and I don't think it's going to be repaired in my lifetime. And so countries like China, it's in their best interest to prove to the world that they have a stable, trustworthy currency. And the best way to do that is to fill your vault with gold, right? Something that we haven't, again, done in the West. And if you want to take, for example, if you're China and you want to go to the Saudis and say, we want to pay for oil in Chinese currency, the first thing the Saudis are going to say is, why should we trust Chinese currency? And if you have a vault full of gold, there's a lot more supporting that statement. Now, we've seen central bank gold purchases accelerate to a rate faster than they have in 50 years. So that should raise your eyebrows. That's physical gold being taken off the market. That's a massive event. You got to ask why, but more importantly, you got to ask what happens next. This is a finite resource. And we're not only seeing central bank purchasing, we're seeing central bank repatriation, which is to say countries that historically were comfortable storing their gold in London or New York now want it within their borders. Germany is a great example. It's a country who's historically stored their gold in New York because Europe, it's a crowded continent, many countries, many nations, tight borders. It always descends into war as a consequence. That's the history of Europe. So Germany was more comfortable storing their gold offshore. But now when there's an actual hot war occurring in Europe, they're more comfortable with their gold within their borders. That's very telling about how they're seeing the future right now. Lots of volatility.
So they and what's going on with China? I mean, the reason China's as you know, I started my first gold mine in China, and I took the company. It was called Mondoro Mining, and we took it public on the Toronto Stock Exchange, and we struck gold in China in Dalian province. And I found out what counterparty risk means and country risk means, and that's what most people don't understand about gold and silver, where it's stored, where God created gold and silver are in some of the most dangerous countries who really don't like America. So here I am. This is back, I forget now when it was, and long time ago. I took the company public on the Toronto Stock Exchange. And about 2 years later, we struck gold in China. And the Chinese came over and said, thank you very much, and took it. So I want you to know that I was a billionaire for about a couple of years. And then the Chinese took my gold mine, and it was tough, I mean, so a thing called counterparty risk or country risk. So it does seem like gold and silver and many of our precious resources are not held on what I would call friendly soil. Any comments on that?
No, I think that counterparty risk from a country standpoint is going to increase dramatically, because if we're departing a world where there was some kind of a fragile, but there was trust, fragile or not, and we're no longer operating that way, we're into a scenario where it's more every country for themselves, right? You can't rely on allies you used to be able to rely on to protect supply chains, et cetera. We're in an energy crisis. We're in a food crisis, right? We're very much in an every man for himself scenario, globally speaking. And so if you've got valuable deposits and resources within your borders and you can't trust the allies you used to be able to trust to protect your supply chains, then what's in your best interest? It's to take those resources and take that value even if they're squandered, and usually they are when resources are nationalized, they're not effectively produced. But I think geopolitical risk is way more significant than it was even 5 years ago.
Yeah. So I ran out yesterday, picked up this gold coin. They come in these sleeves like this. And the reason was gold pushed $2,000. And I went, I think it's beginning. So like Jay said it best, for the last 15 years, it's been a bear market. Nobody really wants gold or silver. They're happy with U.S. treasuries and paper dollars and paper stocks. But now when you look at that hot air balloon hanging over there, after 2008, they kept blowing the balloon bigger and bigger and bigger. And now that little gondola hanging below is the economy. And it's hanging out of this massive hot air balloon of fake money. So yesterday I went, oh my God, this is what I've been waiting for all these years. So I ran out and bought some. But I want to give a plug to this book here. This is called Who Stole My Pension? With myself, Ted Siddell, and myself wrote this book. And what happened in 2008, which caused the hot air balloon to be blown up, Ben Bernanke was our Fed chairman, Federal Reserve Bank chairman. They printed, when the economy collapsed in 2008, they called the Lehman Brothers moment. And Lehman Brothers went down. My prediction is we're going to call it the pension moment, because pensions all over the world are empty. And every time Jay Powell, our not secretary, but our head of the Federal Reserve Bank, pumps more money out there, the more dangerous it gets for people. And when they raise interest rates, the stock market comes down. So I'm saying this to all the baby boomers, the old guys my age. If you're born between 1964 and 1950 something, that your pensions are gone. Your 401k is toast. And people are still saving dollars. And I think what's going to happen, Jay, is when people find out their pensions are gone, this is all over the world. I think the Federal Reserve banks, the Bank of Canada, the Bank of England, they're going to have to start printing even more money to cover, to make sure the old guys, baby boomers, have some kind of money to retire. So that's why when I saw gold top 2,000, I said, I better get off my butt, because the first one I ever bought was $50. So what I paid $50 for back in 1972 is now worth 2,000. What does that projecting forward another 10 years mean? So all the old guys, the boomers, are scrambling around. Our Social Security is bankrupt. And I think the majority of baby boomers, my U.S. baby boomers, are counting on Social Security, and it's bankrupt.
Yeah.
So as a Canadian looking down on the 48 or 50 states here, what do you see going on in the U.S. economy? Because you see it from the same point of view I do, which is precious metal side. But would you trust the U.S. dollar and the U.S. stock market right now?
No, God, no, absolutely not. And if I were to make any projections about how the remainder of this decade will play out, it's how the first few years have played out. It's been this increased unpredictable chaos and volatile scenarios. And I think that party's honestly just getting started. And I'm not a doom and gloom guy. Like I'm long human ingenuity. I think that we're a very impressive species and we'll always find solutions, but there's going to be some very challenging years ahead. You know, your pension scenario is really interesting to me because I'm very curious how that's going to play out. It's like the ultimate example of how counterparty risk can go very, very poorly. When you put your trust, the trust of your retirement in somebody else's hands. What happens if they can't deliver on that? And yeah, Canada's in the same scenario. We'll print to try to solve that problem, right? To give our civilians something to retire on. But when you're dependent on somebody else to finance the balance of your life, that's a very, very uncertain situation. And right now, I'm sure the numbers are the same in Canada. I'm actually more familiar with the United States, but it's like 1/3 of people have zero savings they can retire on. Another third have extraordinarily limited that would require them to reduce the standard of their living in retirement. That's a lot of people. And that's going to be a lot of angry people because they were sold a story that now can't be delivered, right? And so, you look at all the expressions of civil unrest that have occurred over the last 3 years, it's just getting a bit more heated. And this is a really big one. This is a really significant one. I don't know how it's solved. It's terrifying to me. I'm glad that you brought it up. I feel really fortunate that I can maybe I can sort of see this coming right now. And I feel really fortunate that I guess at a young age was introduced to concepts like precious metals and personal sovereignty and a bit more of a libertarian mindset, because I think that is spreading right now. And it's really positive that it's spreading because people need to take control. It's very, very important.
So just to give an idea is that, again, I bought my first coin in 1972. I was a pilot in Vietnam and I had to fly behind enemy lines. The reason to fly behind enemy lines was at one time this gold mine was in U.S. hands.
Right.
But the North Vietnamese army rolled south so fast that the mine was now in enemy hands. And Nixon had just taken the dollar off the gold standard August 15, 1971. And I was pussyfooting around and said, I have time. I'll go buy some gold from this mine. And the next thing you know, the North Vietnamese army rolled south and this mine is now in enemy territory. So I thought if I flew behind enemy lines, I might get a discount from the gold dealer. And what she was a little tiny Vietnamese woman with red teeth. And I go walking up to her and she wanted $50 for a piece of gold. And I said, 50. You're behind enemy lines. I'll give you 40. And she goes, spot. I said, what does spot mean? Do I have a spot on my shirt or something? Spot. And all of a sudden, this little Vietnamese woman educated me. My lights went on. Gold and silver are God's money. They're put here on planet Earth. They're not manufactured out of trees called paper. And so this woman's yelling spot at me. And I realized at that moment why Nixon taking the dollar off the gold standard in 1971 was so important. It just blew the whole global economy into this bubble, which is that hot air balloon, little gondola beneath it. And right now, I think the end is near. So that's why when we come back, we're going to be talking more about why I'm so excited. I love going to the VRIC, the Vancouver Resource Investor Conference, because I go there to learn. And you got thousands of people. You've sold more tickets this year than ever before. And the interest in precious metals is increasing because people can see that gondola is losing air right now. And my generation, we're the first generation with what we call a 401k. In Canada, it's called an RRSP. But basically, exactly as Jay says, you're putting your future retirement in the hands of somebody else. And our central banks are printing that. That's what just happened in England, right? They had to reverse and start printing again because their pensions were going broke. So this whole thing goes back to my generation. This who stole my pension is that my generation, a boomer generation, is the first one that's dependent upon the stock market for their retirement. Up to then, if I worked for Ford Motor Company was in charge of my retirement. But what happened in 1974, corporate America and corporations all over the world, so we don't want to handle the retirement of old guys, the boomers. So we're going to put it in the hands of the boomer themselves. But the trouble is my generation has no financial education, neither does yours really either. And they started saving money, the government prints it, they save stocks, bonds, and mutual funds. And as every time they raise interest rates, the stock market crashes. So that's why when we come back, I'd like to have you discuss why I'm so excited about going to VRIC, on January 29th and 30th. What will you learn? Who will be there? If you're going to listen to me, you listen to me on Zoom. I don't want to listen to myself any longer. So I want to come and hear the other speakers and what they have to say and hopefully scare the crap out of you because you'll take action. If you knew how close we are, instead of a Lehman Brothers moment, we're going to have a pension moment, which came out it started in 1974. All these pension stuff started to happen. Then you might want to attend the VRIC and get educated and talk to people who are really in the industry. So we come back, we'll be talking once again to Jay Martin. He's the president and CEO of Cambridge House, and he puts on the very prestigious Vancouver Resource Investment Conference, January 29th and 30th, which I will be attending. I will be speaking there also, but I don't go to listen to me. And so we come back, Jay, I want you to talk about who the speakers are, what people can expect to learn at an international gold. Welcome back, Robert Kiyosaki, the Rich Dad Radio Show, the good news and bad news about money. And today we have bad news for the boomers. Your pensions are toast. They're empty. And the reason is what was happening in the pensions was Wall Street was helping themselves. So people say, oh, I have a good Wall Street broker. I said, well, they're stealing from you. And this book proves it here. My friends who became pilots for United Airlines after we came back from Vietnam, they found out their pensions were looted also. So I have many classmates, this is very personal to me, that as they retired, they found out their pension was stolen. So instead of a Lehman Brothers moment, we're going to have a pension movement, but also throughout the world right now, interest rates are being raised, stock markets are crashing all over the world. And the baby boomer generation is now saying, how do I retire? But more important, it's not just the baby boomer, it's the children of the baby boomers. What happens when mommy and daddy cannot afford to support themselves anymore? Social Security America's gone. So Jay, what's going to be happening at the VRIC, and who are some of the speakers, and what can people expect to learn? I mean, I'm excited about going to learn more than hear myself talk.
Well, I'm excited to hear you talk, Robert. It's a super fun event. We have over 100 keynote speakers that'll take one of our 6 stages over the course of 2 days. And we try to start with some really important macro themes, and that's focusing on de-dollarization, deglobalization. Are we entering some kind of a new world order in terms of currencies and energy trade? And the speakers that we have, a lot of them are going to be familiar to you and your audience, individuals like Brent Johnson, Grant Williams, Mark Moss, Lynette Zhang. You've got over 100 keynote speakers that we fly in from all over the world. And we start with a lot of important macro themes that are going to drive the flow of capital. I mean, my job as a retail investor is to try to determine, where's the next avalanche of money going, right? And then I want to get there first, and getting myself in front of that avalanche is how you change your life, how you add a zero to your net worth. And, as we know, when the physical metal price starts to run, there's an extraordinary amount of torque to be found in the junior mining industry. And that's where you can consistently find those 5x to 20x returns if you're willing to do the work. And when I say do the work, I mean, come to the show and hear from the experts, individuals like yourself, like Rick Rule, like Frank Giustra, like Ross Beatty. They're all going to be on stage talking their book. I just tell them, like, I want to know where your money is. I don't care about opinions and forecasts. Tell me where you're putting your dough, because that's the ultimate truth teller. And so
the names you just mentioned, they're the rock stars of the precious metal industry.
That's correct.
Frank Giustra, I've never met him, but I've always wanted to meet him. I've interviewed Rick Rule, but boy, that guy's brilliant when it comes to the whole macro economy. See, most people are not macro, they're kind of stock market economy.
Correct.
But when you go precious metals, you go hardcore macro, because it sometimes includes oil, gold, silver, the hard tangible assets, copper, which is huge as electric vehicles come online. And as a geopolitical risk, tensions, the war in Ukraine, the possible war with Taiwan and China, that means gold is flowing everywhere, except, wouldn't you say that most Americans are sound asleep when it comes to gold and silver?
I would say that, and I would say the same for Canadians. For example, right behind my head here, you can see that it's a 100-ounce silver shell made by Silver Gold Bull. And when friends of mine come by and they see, gold coins or silver coins and all sorts of metal, they're like, what's the purpose of this? Where's the yield? I don't understand it, right? And if I have a personal mission behind this event, it's to communicate that if you look back, I mean, you can't study history and not have an appreciation for the value of precious metals. You just can't do one without the other. And sure, maybe there's very few times within history that you actually need to own gold and silver, but during those moments, it's about the only thing you want to own when big things change. And so, yeah, and in our trade show at the event, we'll have over 250 junior mining exploration companies, development companies, production companies in the metal sector. And
can I explain something? The reason I'm so familiar with Vancouver was I was one of those junior mining companies.
That's right.
And I was standing there in my little booth, and all of these sophisticated, the hedge fund guys and all that were walking by, and I'm pushing my little mining deal. And then we actually did find gold, like I said, in China, and I took it public on the Toronto Stock Exchange. So for a brief moment, all I had in that deal was about $100,000. But the gold we found in China pushed me into the $1 billion mark. And so what every gold bug is doing, they're looking for that junior miner who's going to take them to the moon. So when you get to the Vancouver Resource Investment Conference, you get to walk around and talk to all the guys like me who are pitching their deals. I found gold here, I found silver there, I found this here, I found that there. And I just want to give one good happy ending to my China fiasco, because I spent so much time in Vancouver hustling deals and hustling investors. I learned a lot about the gold business. And this year on July 8th, I took a gold mine public in Utah. But if I hadn't made all those mistakes in Vancouver, I would have known a great deal in Utah, and we found the richest gold mine in America. But because I was in Vancouver 10 years earlier. So you come to Vancouver more than just hit the triple, the 10 times, the 20 times, the 30, that one junior mine that goes through the roof. You come for the education. And so I highly suggest people just go from booth to booth and get to as many of those mining companies as possible, as well as listen to the very senior speakers like Rick Rule and Giustra to find out why you should be in gold. But that's why I'm very excited about attending a conference on January 29th and 30th. But I paid for it. I paid my dues hanging out in Vancouver.
and that's what people want to hear. I mean, that's why I throw this event. That's why people come to it, so they can hear those stories, right? And individuals like Ross Beatty, he's delivered 14 companies that have generated a 10x return to his shareholders. I mean, these really are individuals who have been in the game for 40 plus years. In Rick Rule's case, he's been a vet for 40 plus years now. He reminds me every time he gets on stage that he's been in the junior mining industry longer than I've been alive. But, as a consequence, he's got scar tissue, right? And you can hear those war stories from him. And Rick's the first to tell you that he would have had to work half as hard and made 10 times as much money if he knew now, if he knew when he started this business, what he knows now. And if he'd only invested in the same 4 to 6 entrepreneurs. And so, yeah, it's very valuable when you come to a show like this to meet the CEOs who are going to be having that adventure with your cash. Like, can you trust this human being? It's hypercritical. That's why we put everybody in one room together. And, there's one divergent theme that we're going to cover at this show. And I just want to mention it real quick because it's a bit of an outlier. But, we've seen, I know most of your audience is American. This shows up in Vancouver, Canada. So I've got some Canadian specific content. And one theme specifically is we're seeing a rise in the provinces of Canada who are opposing our federal leadership. And this is very significant because it would be like if a collection of states rose up collectively and put forward legislation to separate themselves from the decisions of federal leadership. And we're seeing that right now in Canada, which Canada rarely makes international headlines. We've made a bunch in the last 18, 24 months because of our federal leader. And now the provinces, the equivalent of states, have had enough. And starting with 2 right in the center, Alberta, which is like the Texas of Canada, it produces all the energy. And Saskatchewan, which is like Dakota, like it produces all the food, right? Have both put forward legislation, one being the Saskatchewan First Act, the other being the Alberta Sovereignty Act, which are strictly geared to separate themselves and protect them from measures put forward from the federal government, giving them the power to deny federal decisions within their provincial borders. And the media in Canada is covering this, saying, nobody wants this, right? The public is scared of this. And then the legislation is put forward and it's voted in favor unanimously, bipartisan support within the provinces. So you tell me if people want this or not. And this is a battle that's brewing right now in Canada. And
so this is like, you're like leading the trucker strike.
It's a continuation ripple effect. Yes, exactly. It's the ripple effects of that uprising. And it's very real.
As an American, that to me is interesting because America, asking what do Canadians think of Americans? But what Americans think of Canadians are nice, happy, peaceful people. Then you guys lead this trucker strike, and now you're saying that your provinces are going to withdraw and secede. Like Montreal tried for years to secede.
That's right. That exactly in 1995, and they were remarkably close. They lost that secession vote by it was like 49.8% or something ridiculous. And I don't know if we're headed to that exactly, like a true separatist movement, but the steps are being put in place. The legislation's being put forward, and it's being approved provincially. And so I've invited actually 2 former premiers to come and join me on stage. One is the former premier of Saskatchewan, where this legislation, the Saskatchewan First Act, was voted for unanimously. And his name's Brad Wall. Phenomenal gentleman, resource bull, I would say. And the other is Christy Clark, who's the former premier of British Columbia. And I would say she plays the opposite role when it comes to provincial politics. And so I'm excited to sit down and grill both of them in front of my audience, who's going to have lots of questions about the direction of our country and the provinces, because you have a country like Alberta laden with natural resources. Saskatchewan, the same, uranium, oil, gas, but they're landlocked. They don't have access to international ports, which is where a lot of their grief comes from, because our federal leadership has just stymied their ability to export the resources that used to make Canada wealthy, right? We've been a resource economy forever. That's why we came through the 2008 crisis richer than any other developed nation. And now we have the German chancellor arriving in Canada begging for natural gas, and our prime minister saying, I can't make a sound business case for that. It's like, well, we have it. They need it. Let's do this. But instead, we promise hydrogen power, of which we don't have any. It's ridiculous. It's this more, this virtue game that's going nowhere. But I'm excited to see how it plays out.
Yeah, so people will be able to. This is a historic event. This is like the trucker strike of not that long ago. But also, it's going to be more business opportunities and investment opportunities for people who really want to get on what I call ground floor. because I think it's kind of funny that, I played rugby against you guys, Canadians, all the time. And Canadians always go CA, NA, DA, most polite rugby players we knew. But now you guys are turning into these rebels, taking on your buddy Trudeau. I mean, I remember his father, Pierre Trudeau, oh my God, and his mother. But anyway, Canada is a very rich country. And for those of you who are interested in getting in what they call ground floor and all this, I would go to the VRIC January 29th and 30th to learn from some of the rebels up there who are going to make history, because Canada is an extremely rich country. And with electronic vehicles coming on to stay and all that, I attempted to start a copper mine also in outside of British Columbia. That was a tough job, but it's a tough business. And so that's why, if all of you who want to understand, one of the biggest revolutions going is in precious metals, but because we're going to have a pension crisis, Social Security crisis, stock market crisis, and if you're saving US dollars with a Canadian loonie, you're crazy, because they're going to start printing like crazy. That's what just happened in England, right? They had to start printing again, because if they stopped printing, their pensions would go broke in England. So all that did was make the value of the pound sterling worth less and less. So the same thing is going to happen in Canada. Same thing is happening in the U.S. as we speak. And that's why that balloon with a gondola is hanging beneath of it. Is, you look at America is now 31 trillion in debt. After 1971, when Nixon took us off the gold standard, we didn't have that much debt. And now we're 31 trillion. If they push interest rates to 5%, that means the U.S. taxpayer has to pay approximately 1.5 trillion in interest just on the U.S. national debt. What is that going to do to the dollar? What is that going to do to the Canadian currency? And here we are, some of the richest two countries in the world, plus Mexico is extremely rich. But the average person has no idea about gold, silver, copper, lithium, all the resources that are required to run an economy. So Vancouver is going to be, I wish you had more time, because I couldn't get around to see all the other little junior miners out there. I'd be standing there in my little booth, talking about, I was pitching my China deal, and I was right. We took it public, but then the Chinese took it. So my next gold mine's in Utah. It's a little safer.
Smart move. Yeah.
Anyway, so I congratulate you for putting it on. Anything else people can expect to learn by talking to little junior miners and listening to the big dogs like Rick Rule speak about what's happening in movements of gold throughout the world?
Yeah, that's it, Robert. Every name that I mentioned, plus 90 more, we'll be giving 20-minute keynote speeches all throughout the conference. In addition, we do full hour deep dives into as many commodities as I feel are relevant right now. We're going to be going super deep into the supply and demand economics of gold, of silver, of copper, of uranium. And because, as you mentioned, the base metals right now are probably poised to skyrocket as well. It doesn't matter which direction the energy trend goes, the infrastructure required, the steel alloys required are going to put massive demand on copper and nickel. So lots of conversations. There's so many macro threads occurring at once. Anybody who wants to come, there's tickets at cambridgehouse.com. It's up in Vancouver, British Columbia on January 29th and 30th. And it's super fun. The nice thing about these events is if you want to come and meet Rick Rule, you've seen him give speeches for 10 years and you want to meet him, just come. Once he's off the stage, he always makes time to connect with the audience. As does everybody else. I encourage that from our speakers. They're on the floor to connect, to answer questions, get photos, whatever people are looking for. But it's a community event. It's super fun.
Yeah. And one thing about the difference between miners and stock players, like Jim Rogers, who lives in, I think he lives in Singapore now.
Yeah.
He wrote the book Hot Commodities. and commodities are going to come on bigger than ever before. But every time I deal with stock guys, they think they're off in the wild blue yonder. The thing I like about commodity guys, they work with their hands. They're in the mines. You know, I've been in deep down in the mine pits looking for gold and all that. So we're not as high and mighty and think we're better than everybody else as we do in the stock market. So anyway, again, didn't you say that you're selling twice as many tickets this year than last year?
Yes, yes. And I honestly, I don't say that boasting, Robert. It's like,
No, I
it's
know.
a question to me. Why are twice as many people today interested in a junior mining or a resource investment conference than were 12 months ago? I mean, that speaks to the sentiment. And I can personally say I increased my physical gold holdings by 50% this year. And I'm not a novel thinker or a trendsetter. Typically, when I'm doing something, yes, there's a wave of people doing it too, you know, and so I pay attention to that.
Yeah, I think, you know, when gold passed 2,000, I went, uh-oh, that's a lot. You know, that's like when gold passed $50. It didn't stop. It didn't look backwards.
Mm.
And then it went to 800 and then pulled back. And then it went to two, and now just, and it's about to take off again. In my opinion, I could be wrong.
Sure.
But given EVs, electronic vehicles, the pumping of fake money into the economy, the COVID thing, Canadian truckers going on strike, provinces going on strike, and Canada, Mexico, and US are extremely rich countries. And you come to the Vancouver Resource Investor Conference to meet the little guys who are digging around the world looking for some gold or silver, or oil, or copper to get rich. So for those of you with a more adventurous spirit, Canada, Vancouver is one of the most beautiful cities in the world. And I love your beer, your Labatt's beer, and it's really a great place. But I learned so much in Vancouver because I was hanging out with thousands of entrepreneurs. I think everybody at Vancouver is an entrepreneur, and they're all pitching their deals. And I don't recommend doing any deal unless you check them out. But I learned more about how to pitch a deal, what people look for in a deal, what made a good miner, bad miner. But you come to learn. And so that's why I'm very happy to promote your show, the VRIC, January 29th and 30, Vancouver, British Columbia. Final words, Jay. Final words.
I'm excited you're coming. We've got some amazing panels with you specifically, yourself and Mark Moss and a couple others. We'll be talking about the New World Order. So much fun content. I mean, honestly, it's my favorite 2 days of the year because I get to park myself on stage and grill individuals like you and try to get answers to my biggest questions. So, yeah, you're right. It's, you know, my first and foremost motivation is capital gains here, Robert. There's not many industries that can deliver those 5x, 20x returns if you're willing to do the work. And that's what this show is all about.
Yeah. And if you're an entrepreneur, this is your show. You come to listen to hundreds of other entrepreneurs pitching their deals in one space in 2 days. Anyway, congratulations on all your success. I look forward to seeing you a few days in Vancouver, British Columbia.
Likewise.
So we come back with final words with Sarah on the Canadian VRIC, and what do you see? Robert Cusack of the Rich Dad Radio Show, the good news and bad news about money. I want to thank Jay Martin for being a guest on that show. I invited him on. He didn't ask me to promote his show. I'm promoting his show because if you think you're an entrepreneur and you want to strike it rich in the hottest sectors, not technology right now, it's actually precious metals and commodities. This is your show. And I learned so much about what it takes to be an entrepreneur in Vancouver. I call them all the Frito Banditos. You know, they're Canadian, but everybody in Vancouver has got some deal they're working on. So I learned how to pitch deals, what made them good, what made them bad. And a lot of them were bad. But I had one of those, I took it public on Toronto Stock Exchange, my first company. We struck it, but then the Chinese took it. Now that's priceless. But this year I got my revenge and I took the Trixie mine public, which we found in Utah. So anyway, it's a good time. And this, you can tell you're pretty solid with the industry. This here is a silver bullet sent to me by Dana Samuelson out of Austin, Texas, because I buy so much gold and silver. He sent me a silver bullet. This is 2 ounces here. So, Sarah, what did you think of the idea of Vancouver and resources and
You know what
entrepreneurship?
I think is so cool is Jay's a young guy, and he's in what I think traditionally is considered an old man's field,
Yeah, yeah,
resources and oil and uranium. I mean, for me personally, I always just think, that's old money. But really,
no,
seeing guys like Jay talk about it, like you're really capturing the importance of this um, investment vehicle, right? Rather than holding dollars or stocks or bonds,
right.
So I think it's super cool what he's doing, and he's put together a heck of a lineup. If you go to the website cambridgehouse.com, you can see all of the speakers and the lineup, and of course you're speaking. And I don't know, I think what he's doing is awesome for the next generation, the younger generation. We always talk about boomers and their pensions being gone, and this is a way for those under 40 to get ahead of the game.
Yeah.
So they're not in their parents' position when they're 65.
Right. I was in my 30s when I started attending those conferences, just because it fascinated me. Because this is silver, and I call it God's metal because God put silver here. But this is gold. This is real gold, and God put it here. But up to now, everybody's been doing it paper and this and that and flipping stocks and flipping real estate. I wanted to talk to the real hardcore entrepreneurs. So
Yeah,
that's
well,
why
that's a
that,
good point, though. It's like paper and stocks paper seems easy, right? There's an easy barrier to entry. Try digging a hole in the ground and finding oil. So I think there's that barrier. But I think the more we talk about it, the more we educate. You're great at it. We've done several shows on gold and silver,
yeah.
especially with like Marin Katusa and resources, and I think you're doing great about educating about that piece that doesn't get talked about a lot.
Yeah, because gold and silver, this is gold and this is silver. This is real money. And so that's why I was attracted to Vancouver. I spent years up there putzing around, learning from all these. I call them the Frito Banditos, because every one of them was always pitching a deal. And I learned more about entrepreneurship in Vancouver than I did in the States. So I want to thank you for putting this on, Sarah. For those of you, again, it's Jay Martin. He's the president and CEO of Cambridge House, Vancouver Resource Investment Conference, VRIC, January 29th and 30th. He didn't ask us to do this. I did this because for those of you who are really interested in becoming entrepreneurs, this is one aspect of you being an entrepreneur.